Thank you, and good afternoon. So for my little session this afternoon is really building upon the fact that, as Stephanie said, I've been involved for many, many years in the technology and learning industry. And today I'm an independent kind of consultant in this arena. And I thought for this session this afternoon, for the next 20 minutes, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the practicalities of talent management and integrating learning, talent, and performance management within a company. I hope that's of interest to you. I hope that's what you came in to hear, because that is what I'm going to talk about. And what I'd like to do in this session is to just touch upon some key questions that one should bear in mind if one is going to look at the whole world of integrating talent management, performance, learning within any organization. And the fascinating thing I believe about this time that we're in right now is that it continues to change. That's a bit sort of bland, that statement. We're still in the middle of a lot of change going on in the world of talent, online learning, performance management. It's been going on for a long, long time, but we're nowhere near the end. So practitioners who are trying to address the challenges within their organizations, in my opinion, are doing it at a time when so much has been learned and has been developed, but yet there's so much more to do. But you can't sort of say, okay, I'm going to wait another 10 years. You've got to get in and do it now, hence the reason why I'd like to just touch upon some of these questions today. Like, can learning, talent, and performance programs work together? What are the models? And I'm going to give you 3 models for you to think about that will, I think, are important, are methodologies you can use depending upon the type of organization you are in. That actually, the type of organization you're in influences the answer. And therefore, which strategy is most likely to be successful for you. Clearly, in 20 minutes, I'm not going to give you the answer for you, but I want to give you some things to think about. And you know, when I think about the technology that's being deployed today, as I look around, I'm sort of clearly in the older group here, but you know, I remember when spreadsheets came out first, and the people in organizations that use spreadsheets were the accountants. And nobody could dream for a moment that anybody else would ever want to use the damn things, because they were such specialist things. But we use exactly the same product now, exactly the same conceptual product, although much easier to use today, by everybody in the organization. So I have the sense at the moment that the systems that we're looking at in the area of talent management, online learning, performance management, that we're moving from the accountant's use of the old spreadsheets to the more popular use. And therefore, if you are practitioners looking to implement this in your business, I think you're dealing with an incomplete set, but a damn fine set of tools out there today. So the first question that I'd like to tease you with is, well, why bother integrating these things? Talent management systems exist in companies. Online learning's been around since Methuselah was a lad. Performance management is there. Why would you bother integrating them? I mean, you only do it if there's a reason. If you haven't got a reason, then just don't bother. But I think there is a very compelling reason. And it's what I call closing the strategy to performance gap. And if you look here at this little graphic, every organization, at least everyone that's trying to be serious about its business, should have open up with a strategy that the executive level team come up with. And they say, here's what we're trying to do as an organization. And then ultimately, that should be executed by the organization itself, all the people therein. So everybody starts off with a strategy, and the goal is to execute that brilliantly for the benefit of the business or the organization, even if it's or not-for-profit or whatever, the education establishment. Okay? But traditionally, in the business world specifically, start off with a strategy and you want to execute it. Every company wants to do that. But the issue is that there's a gap between the executive level making this decision, and the organization actually delivering on it. And the blue pieces in here highlight the things you must do to move from strategy to effective execution. You must align your people. You know this from all the management textbooks, so that's no great insight this afternoon. But you must do it if you want to execute the strategy that you've come up with. Furthermore, you then need to develop the people that you have aligned within your organization. Now, for those of you who are blessed with a workforce that's exactly developed to do exactly the right job in every part, every cog within your organization, you can probably leave now because you're probably going to get bored. But on the basis that most companies don't have everybody perfectly developed for that job within the organization's life cycle today, and remember it will change, you need to think about how you're going to develop these people. And then you need to deploy them in the appropriate places within the organization and move in order to deliver on execution. So you've got a strategy to performance or execution gap that you need to glue. And the tools that will help you address that gap are talent management tools, learning content, learning management systems, all of which will operate independently. But if you can integrate them, you have a greater chance of addressing that performance gap. So when you look at talent management systems that are around today, they're getting better and better, more and more comprehensive. And these are the kind of things that you would look to do in an organization, from workforce planning, compensation, succession planning. These are all the things that organizations want to do that talent management systems are trying to pull together. But at the core of it all, it's really important that your people deliver on close this strategy to performance gap. Because what you really want to do is monitor strategic goals, identify performance gaps, correct development issues. Actually, I'm not mad about the idea of the term talent management at all. I prefer the term talent development. Because in truth, what an effective organization wants to do is to manage its talent and develop its talent for the purpose and for the benefit of the business or the organization. So the items here at the core of what the company is trying to do are to do things like coaching employees, improving bench strength, etc. So these are the reasons why I think you should bother looking at integrating a talent management, a learning, and a performance management suite within your organization. But let's look at the evolution of what has got us to where we are today. Historically, all the things that we showed in that little chart a moment ago, compensation, workforce planning, onboarding, they've typically been done in silos, because in the past they've been done on paper, they've been put in files. A payroll system was run by the finance department, a HR system induction is done by the HR department. So it's been done in silos typically. Then over the years, software became more prevalent and allowed us then to become more efficient but still siloed in the way that we did what we did. But the interesting thing about the software was it began to drive a need for data to flow through the company. And what that exposed is the fact that, of course, the data does not flow. So we end up with not paper-based systems in silos anymore, but software-based systems in silos. So interestingly, over the last decade, which I call the tumultuous 2000s, many companies of the industry that I was involved in started to react to the business opportunity of providing systems that would bring together some of these software products, pull together systems that would unify and offer a single solution to customers. You know, whether it be, you know, people like Oracle, a database company, they decided to buy Taleo and become a talent management company. IBM 6 months ago, only 6 months ago, not 6 years ago, bought Connexa. So IBM are now going to become a talent management company. All great news, I believe, for organizations who want to improve their work, their talent development. But it does touch upon, and I'll show you this at one of the points I'll leave you at the end, is what it touches upon is the fact that the landscape is still being built as we speak here today, 10 years later. Okay? And the three models that we have available to us today are what I would call disaggregated, integrated, or unified. They're your three choices. We can have an argument, by the way, if you've got a fourth one, but I haven't got a fourth one, but I'm prepared to, but I like an argument. What this means in essence is, in a disaggregated model, each function just has its own software application. Very common, very evolving, very natural over the years as the industry and organizations have developed. The second is what I call integrated. Here's where you have different applications, but the data starts to flow through some of them. And it flows through some of them, the some which are important, because it's really hard to get that data flow working. And organizations often try and just give up, but they try harder for the ones that are important and they don't bother for the ones that are not that important. And then the final is a unified, single system, a single data flow. Now, as it's going to become blindingly obvious, the one I recommend is the unified approach. However, that's not always that practical, not always, you know, really possible within organizations. So from a practical point of view, let's have a look. A disaggregated, you might say, well, yeah, my organization has a kind of disaggregated model already, and I'd like to change that. I'd like to make it a much more unified system. And that's a laudable desire, but you have to ask yourself the question, is it really on? Or are you prepared to end your career on the back of that particular, on the top of that particular hill? Because large organizations that are silo-oriented, they're the ones that typically have disaggregated systems. And unfortunately, the cost of moving to another system can be prohibitive. Or even politically, it can be just too difficult to do. So if you decide that this is not the ideal system or systems that we have in place, but we would like, and therefore I think we'd like to move to the ideal, well, you've really got to ask yourself questions about your organization first. And if your organization fits this description, you may well just be fighting against a breeze that will ultimately blow you over. And in organizations, large organizations that are silo-oriented, you've got the top of the organization has got to decide that this is not the way we want to run our business before you will have a fertile ground into which to implement a unified system, in my opinion. And again, happy to have the arguments if people see it differently. But, you know, I can think of in the day when I was CEO of Apple here in the UK for a number of years. And, you know, we think of Apple as being a global organization. But actually, you know, a bit of an inside story here for you. Apple UK ran as a silo. Apple Germany ran as a silo. Apple USA ran as a silo. And if we thought about introducing a talent management system back in my day, people didn't move from the UK to Germany. So what was or to California from Frankfurt or from Milan. So therefore, why was the need for a unified talent management system that would identify successors etc. within the organization? So therefore, the organization itself decided that's the way it wanted to run. My caveat on this story is it's been a while since I worked in Apple, so things may have changed. But with the organization deciding that's the way it wants to run, it was pointless having some evangelist step forward and say, I've seen the future for the way to optimize the talent that we have within our organization, even though every single manager across every single office, across every single country cried out for great talent. Something had to change with the way the organization thought, worked. If that's your organization, this is a practical session, not a theoretical one. I suggest to you that what you do is you build the best disaggregated system that you can and continue to optimize the fabulous standalone software products that will allow you to do great things, better things today than we could do 10 years ago, and better things in 5 years' time than we do today. And let that be your goal. Maybe on the way, as the evangelist, if you feel so bold, you can corner the CEO and explain to her or to him how the organization really has its head up the wrong part. But that's obviously a longer and more challenging issue than simply saying, hey, I want an integrated talent and learning and performance system. An integrated system, which is, I think, more desirable than a disaggregated one, is most likely to be done only in core or most dependent applications. This is where you can, if your organization is appropriate for it, and you know that when you think about it, the key thing here is to pick your master system, because you're going to end up with a master system, whether you like it or not. You mightn't choose to. So it's going to happen by accident. So my advice is don't let it happen by accident, let it happen by design. Choose your master system of record. And then any other integrated pieces, try and get them to flow off that. Because my point about here keeping your life cycle in mind is that the chances are in a number of years' time, maybe 5 years' time, you will move to a unified system. So try and identify, because the software is going to take you there. For example, it is my opinion, this is very speculative now, but it is nonetheless my opinion, and I'm happy to share it, that in the future, in organizations, in the years ahead, in organizations, the vast majority, if not all, of e-learning will be consumed by the learner through a talent management system, not through an LMS that it is today. Because instead of, as we have done for years and years, giving the learner an online library key to an online library of thousands of courses, what will happen in the near years ahead, people within organizations will have a system, we call it talent management today, it'll be called something else soon, where they will, with their manager or their other peers, will identify the development that they need now for the next, say, 6 months. And that will require some training, some peer-to-peer stuff. But within the training side of it, the system will deliver to them from this online library the specific training they need today or for the next 6 months. You have 6 months to complete this program. And then in 6 months' time, the system, following reviews with your manager or reviews with peer-to-peer reviews or 360 reviews, will then tell you what the next piece of development you need. Some of which may be online learning, and it will deliver that to your computer as well. Point I'm saying is, in this, is that today, as you look to produce an integrated system, bear in mind that it's going to get more and more and more integrated as you go forward. Why do I think that's going to happen? It's because that's what all the companies are doing in the background, trying to get to that position today. Look at all the talent management companies that you know, the big players out there who are licensing online learning to go with their system. Why are they licensing a product to fit in with a talent management system that they own and created and want to sell to you? Because they like paying royalties to the online learning providers? No, because their customers are demanding it. The customers are saying, this is a good system, but we need to do the training as well. And they're going, hell, we're not a training company. Okay, let's bolt this stuff in. So the integration is beginning to happen because of the market forces. And then finally, there's a unified approach. And clearly, I believe it's the best way to go because you will close that strategy to performance stroke execution gap, and you will solve your data flow issues, and you will be ready for the future today. But I do want to leave you with one little kind of inside little tip, that if you do decide, and by the way, this is, as I said here in the first point, it's really only if you're starting out or restarting from scratch, because you've got to go, you've got to build it from the ground up, in my opinion. You don't have to throw out everything. You could be lucky what you have in place, but you need, probably you do need to re-architect or start from scratch with a single unified architecture, which is quite easy to do, by the way. But the one thing that if you, from a practical point of view, speak to providers of systems, the one thing I'd suggest you do is ask them for their ERD, which is the entity relationship diagram. This is like the architect's drawing of the system, which says how all the bits, compensation, induction, workforce planning, learning, performance management, how they all are architected into one unified system. And the unspoken secret within this industry is that you won't find many, because most of them are not. Most of them are not architected from one single source. In fact, I don't know of any, but I'm prepared to be proven wrong on that. But if I'm wrong, it'll be because you found the exception that proves this rule. So, well, are you just not bothered then? Well, actually, in looking at the ERD, and you get all kinds of reasons from the providers why they think, yeah, you don't need to see that, and don't worry about it, and we show you something else, is that what you'll find is that some are much more integrated than others, and the ERD will show you. So in truth, you're not looking for perfection, you're looking for the ones that have the best and simplest integration built architecture within their system. So that's one of the things I would suggest you look for when you look for a unified system. And if nothing else, it'll start a fascinating discussion between you and a provider that you might consider speaking to. So, the three models that you need to think about, which will help you address the issue of closing that strategy to execution gap. The key things to take away are, unlike Jack and the Beanstalk, there's no magic beans. That's what life is like. You have to look at your organization. Remember that we're in the middle of a continuum. Decide what your organization is capable of kind of swallowing. That's why I use the term pick your most appropriate poison in the case of the unified one. See what your organization is capable of swallowing without breaking. And then, when you've decided that, I would encourage you to look for the most unified system that you can implement within your organization, because that will pay you dividends in the years and decades ahead. Thank you very much indeed.
very much, Brendan. So we've got 15, 20 minutes for questions to Paul and Brendan, or any observations or stories of your own, or any takeaways that you're going to take back and talk about in your organisation. So I've got a microphone I'm going to walk around with. Anyone want to kick us off? I've got some questions, if not. All right, well, I'll start us off then. So let's start with Paul. So I found your presentation and your kind of ideas really interesting. The question that came to my mind was, when you ask employees to contribute feedback about other employees, who owns that content, and are there any limitations on what you can do with it?
Okay, that's a great question. And that I would put under just a general data policy. So my recommendation is that you write, when people come on board and they sign non-disclosure, non-solicit employment agreements and so forth, put into it that any content that they create as an employee is the company's content. It's the company's intellectual property. So I wouldn't single out just what we were talking about here, just put it under the umbrella of everything that they create. And in my experience, employees don't push back on that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, a question about the, I quite like the idea of having the mail address and sending instant feedback. I quite like that. Have you got any examples of how people or organisations have collated that data and then managed the output? Because I'm just imagining quite a lot of volume of emails, and how do you as a small team potentially manage that?
Great question. Well, kind of going back to Brendan's 3 different choices, I've seen it done in the simplest way is it's a separate email inbox that the HR director has access to and can pull that content out and put it into a Word doc that's the annual appraisal. That's one way. Another way is to write a script, which doesn't take very long. Your IT people can do this. They'll tell you it'll take 2 weeks, but they can probably do it in a day. They can write the script and just put it off into a SQL database or an Access database, which is the next level of sophistication. Ideally, what you would do is, if you have a talent system like Brendan was talking about, you would write another script that would take that, because in that example there were only 4 data points. So you could take that content and then simply map it to the database for the talent software that you already have. Any 3 will work. Any 3 is better than not collecting the content that people are perfectly willing to write. That address the question? And if you want more technical details about that, we can chat afterwards.
Just do a very long, quiet walk now to bring the microphone up.
Hi, this is a question for Brendan. I thought it was really interesting, your vision of the future, your personal vision where talent management systems or talent development systems actually are going to replace learning management systems. I can understand all businesses want to get the best talent out of their people and to develop the talent, but when it comes to competencies with compliance training, for instance, is that really a talent, or is that just a kind of, isn't that stretching the definition of talent if you're just competent, sure, at obeying the law?
Yeah, okay, it's a fair point. I think talent is a multifarious word. It can mean both the individual and it can mean a skill. Somebody's talent, or they can be a talent. Particularly in the acting world, talk about talent being the people. And I'm going to come at that from the company point of view, because you ask about compliance arenas, where you're really providing the people with the tools they need, I guess you mean, to do their job within the compliance sector. The companies at the end of the day most of the time, are focused on themselves. They see the people, the talent, as the human resource within the organization. And with the odd exception, their goal is to develop the people for the benefit of the organization. Now, the more enlightened understand that also developing the people for their own good ultimately benefits the business as well, and many companies are like that today. So whatever development the company decides to give, to offer to the individual, that can be either development that will enhance their own skills as, say, a manager or as a leader, as a supervisor, or specifically can give them the tools to do an excellent job within their specific compliance requirement. So, for example, one of the businesses that I was involved in was in the food safety arena. So where we provided online food safety training to all the staff of companies like TGI Fridays, and so all the waiters and waitresses learned their food handling skills and information. So they were provided with that training predominantly because the company, in this case TGI Friday, wanted to ensure that its staff were the most expert when it came to handling food, both in terms of how they did it carefully and that they did it in a way that the customer found engaging, etc. So whether it be, that was purely that was ostensibly a compliance thing, because it included things like washing your hands and all the health and safety things you needed specifically for restaurants. So that was provided, that will be provided through a talent system in the future as part of ensuring you have the skills to do your job. And in addition, one would hope, it would provide you with other training that would give you the skills to grow as an individual within the organization. Is that answering the question you asked? Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks.
Brendan, I'll ask you a question. So you said that the unified model is the best one to go for. So if you are aiming to implement a unified model, do you need to be an expert in learning and talent and performance? Where should your expertise lie?
Great, actually. So, and the beautiful answer to that question is no, you don't have to be an expert. Because actually, the systems today are fantastic. I kind of deliberately set the tone of, hey, you want to be careful. You want to look carefully here when you're looking at these things. But in a short 20 minutes, you don't get time to do everything, cover everything. But one of the things I would like to emphasize is that the tools are becoming fantastic. They are really so powerful, much more easy to implement, that you don't have to be an expert at all. All you have to be is a good business person, actually. Because you can now say, I'd love if my people were, if my supervisors had the skills to be able to encourage, not just to, kick the staff along, but encourage them to be better employees, etc. Now, the software is there, the tools are there like never before. So in fact, there's a phenomenal opportunity, in my view, to unleash the power of individuals within your organization, and you don't have to be a talent management expert. You don't have to be an e-learning expert. You don't have to be a performance management expert. All you got to do is be somebody who understands what you want to get out of your people for their benefit and for the company's benefit. And the tools they're getting much, like the example I use of the spreadsheet when the accountants had it, and then we all had them back then. The ones the accountants had, like you had to be a programmer to use them. For those of you who may remember some of them. Now, you can just, it's quite easy. Anybody can use them once you understand what you're trying to achieve. And I would suggest the tools today are like the spreadsheet of today. Once you know what you want to do with your numbers, you don't have to be an expert on programming. You just got to switch it on, and it will help you deliver much better than ever before.
So it's a lot less daunting than it sounds.
A lot less daunting. It's the architecting is, the whole system, I think, is a bit of a challenge. Not to be underestimated, but not daunting at all.
I'm going to ask a question which is probably completely off the wall, because I came here thinking this was going to be about talent spotting.
Okay.
So, of course, and this has been interesting too. But,
thank you.
but I was thinking, yeah, but how do you how can you, in large organizations, spot the talent and be brave enough to let that talent grow? And I think that that's, for many companies, that's an issue. So there are sleepers out there, I call them sleepers, who are really clever, really talented, but they're frightened sometimes to really show off and explain or describe how much they could do or the potential they have. Or indeed, we don't necessarily have the managers out there who can spot it, or if they can spot it, that they suppress it. So whether there's an answer, I don't know.
You have a go, and I've got an answer as well.
And you're absolutely right on that issue. And I would just circle back around to the crowd knows. They know where the stars are. All you have to do is go to the crowd. Now, I'm not saying that that's easy, but if you set up some of these, even these low-tech ways, you can find out. There's also a good bit of research that's being done where if you can set up systems where you can identify the connections between people. Like this person emails that person 5 times a day, and that person only gets 1 email a day, and just all these ways that you can mine the data that you have to find out where I call them spark plugs, or you call them sleepers, the people that are out there. So you can get at them, and you raised a really good point, which is if you just rely on a certain level of managers, you're going to have stars that aren't going to come because the managers are intimidated. That's why it's critical that you get after the crowd and engage with the crowd.
And my comment on that, it's a really key point of organization challenges today. And actually, with systems in place, I think organizations are going to start to overcome that like never before. Because we've been involved in implementing these in many organizations. And let me tell you what happens. When you put in a talent management system, just by having it in, people are now formally using a computer to put in comments, and people know, hey, this is not just going to go in a file, it's going to sit in the HR director. This is now on a system, and at the end of the year, once a year, maybe twice a year, but mostly once a year, my manager will get access to this and be reviewed. So if I put in something about my people, that will be reviewed by other people, and me, I'll be reviewed. So now all of a sudden, just by having it in place, people are aware that the company is sort of saying, hey, we want to know about you. Now, obviously, you want the culture of the company to say, we want to know about you and we want to help you grow, as opposed to, we want to find out about you. Okay? So let's assume we can make that happen, which is not that hard. But with a system in place, in the past, bad managers could let their sleepers just die off. Now with this kind of system, it almost forces the bad manager to at least do the review, at least go through the process, and then these systems will throw out graphs that say, leaders and people to be developed. They will also maybe say people who are at the bottom, they've been there too long and they're not trying. So park on that a second. But your sleepers, your stars, will just rise up on the system. Now, no one turns it on, but anybody who's half interested now will for the first time have a tool that says, hey, those 3 people there, who are they? And that's then the door is open. So I think it's a real issue, has been around since Adam, but now these tools, I would suggest to you that we're on the cusp of software systems opening up the talent within our organizations. We call them talent management. That's why I really don't like, I prefer talent development, because these systems are going to develop the talent within our organizations. Sorry, Paul.
Well, and that raises a really good point. I regret to inform you that if you do a formalized or even an informal talent practice that you put into place, it's going to take 3 years to bed in. The first year, people don't know how to use it. And it's going to be painful, and they're going to think this is a waste of time, blah, blah, blah. The second year, they'll figure out how to use it. And in the third year, they'll start using it well. So my caution there is, if you do sell this, like Brendan said, to the CEO or to the head of HR or whomever you have to sell it to, let them know that in the first year, it's not going to have great results, but you have to stick with it over time. Because it will work and it will take off, like Brendan said.
Thanks very much. Brendan, just a quick question. If I wanted to go back to my department and talk about this, they like to be able to see examples, screenshots, or, you know, systems that are already working. Is there a place where you can do that?
Sorry, I didn't catch you. Repeat that for me.
I was just wondering, for me to be able to describe it to other people and the benefits of it, it's useful to have visual aids of the sort of results it sort of kicks out at the end and the input. And I was just wondering where the best place to go for that sort of information is.
Examples of what?
This sort of system, you know, so that people can imagine it existing and the benefits of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. You mean a complete system in action?
No, I mean, if you think about, like, for example, I work in the Scottish Government, so it'd be useful for them to see screenshots for it being used in, like, a private company or another public sector organisation.
Okay.
Can I take a shot?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you. One of the, and that's a great question because I face that all the time. I think one of the simplest ways to do it, and you can go to any of the vendors that are downstairs, and they will be able to provide you with what I call a tab representation. So most of these systems will have a tab for induction and one for goal setting and one for learning and development and a tab for performance management and succession and compensation. So all this software is built on the tab concept. And if you can get a screenshot of each tab, which is 10 slides in a PowerPoint deck, you can tell the story at a very high level and talk about how, like Brendan was saying, the data can and does flow through the system. As opposed, and then of course, the final slide would be to say, okay, and here's where our data is now, and take a picture of a filing cabinet. That's a pretty strong way to explain the concept.
Yeah, and again, from a practical point of view, I think this is a great time to do it, this show, because if you go and look at the talent management systems that are on display here in the exhibition, you get to see some great examples of how they are being deployed in organizations. And yeah, okay, like in all presentations, sales presentations, they'll be rose tinted, and they'll look lovely, but they will give you a really good use case of how these systems are deployed or can be deployed. I guess, look, today's session was very practical. Think about these things. So, as opposed to here's why you should go out and get one of these systems. But there are fabulous reasons why you should go out and get these systems. So have a look here. You're going to see all the players are in this building. Have a look at them, and you'll then get a good use case sense. And then then the hard work starts, because it's this thing will touch the entirety of your organization, like so few other things will, that it's really important that you do a bit of thinking beforehand before you jump in. Because we've too many examples of people jumping in and then being disappointed, buyer's remorse. And it's very hard to restart when you've had buyer's remorse with a system like that, particularly when it's going to impact so many people in your organization. So look, I don't want to make you fearful. In fact, I'm excited about this fantastic arena. But I guess if it's your first time to look at it, then get excited yourself about it and just be mindful of some of these things. If it's not your first time, then you probably know what I'm talking about anyway.
And I just want to piggyback on that and circle back to one of Stephanie's questions from before, which was, do you have to be an expert? And the fact of the matter is you have experts in your organization. The HR person, the recruiting person, the compensation, the training, they're all going to have an opinion. And what you're going to have to get through is they're all going to want a different vendor. So you do want to be knowledgeable of the market. You don't have to be a technical guru, but you do want to know, the landscape of the market. And another inside tip is, if you want to know the strengths of a particular solution provider, ask them, what were you 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Because that's going to tell you where they grew up on in the industry. So there's vendor A is going to have its start in recruiting, and that's going to be their strongest part. And guess what? Your recruiting manager is going to want to pick that one. And the same thing for all the other solution providers. But it's really important to find out not just what's on their marketing materials now, but where did they grow up? So that in conjunction with the ERD is really going to inform you.
Great tip. We're going to have to call it a day, unfortunately. Thanks for all your questions. The champagne reception should be starting outside very shortly, so that will kind of soften the blow of the end of the day. Before we go, can we just say final thanks to Paul and Brendan, please?